Iran has conducted cyber attacks against the United States and our Gulf partners. Iran has been behind terrorist attacks throughout the rest of the world, including a plot to kill Adel al-Jubeir, who was then the Saudi ambassador to the United States. Whether it be assassination attempts, support of weapons of mass destruction, deploying destabilizing militias, Iran spends its treasure and time disrupting peace.
U.S. President Donald Trump has just finished his first major trip abroad, and despite promises for peace and reconciliation for the region, it began with the signing of a multi-billion-dollar arms deal. Trump arrived for his first international trip to a huge reception by the Saudis. During his stay, several deals were signed worth a total of $400 billion, but the centerpiece is a $110 billion deal that comes amid rising tensions with the Saudis' main rival, Iran. Saudi Arabia's leadership has recently hardened its stance against rival Iran's growing involvement across the Middle East, many saying that it's due to greater support from the new White House administration. Well, joining us now is the former head of the CIA, Ambassador James Woolsey. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk some more about this. You heard President Trump in Saudi Arabia. What did you think of his speech? Did you like it?
Yes, I thought it was a good speech.
Tell me why.
Well, it did many things. One is that it staked out the violations of international law and human decency that have come from the Iranian regime. It made clear, I think, that from our point of view, Iran is a theocratic, totalitarian, genocidal empire. And we need to combat it with everything at our beck and call. I think we have some 50 Muslim-predominant states now who are willing to work with us on that. And I don't speak at all ill of the fine Iranian people. It's their terrible government that we have to do something about.
Do you not find it ironic in any way, shape or form that the Iranians come off the back of an election with more than 73% turnout where they vote for a reformist candidate, yet President Trump is in Saudi Arabia where, as was mentioned earlier, people are still executed for witchcraft and sorcery in this day and age, talking about human rights violations in Iran? Doesn't that sound a little bit odd?
What's the word in Farsi? Something like tahiyya, lying to infidels.
Arabic,
I think
taqiyya.
this whole Iranian. Oh, okay, thank you. I think this whole thing about Iranian reformers is nonsense.
So are those people
I
duped?
don't trust a word that they are saying, and I trust absolutely nothing that they are doing. And I don't believe that anything is more emblematic of the way they deal with popular views than the massacres that they undertook in '09, which our President Obama sadly did not intervene in. He should have intervened to help the students who were getting massacred by the Guard.
Yeah, but undoubtedly you still had many people from the Green Movement that stood up against President Ahmadinejad back in 2009, who decided this time around that they trust the system enough, or they trust incremental change enough to want to be a part of the process to vote for someone who can turn the dial. Don't you at least want to give them some credit for that?
I think it's ridiculous to believe that there was any element of freedom at all in this Iranian election or in anything done by the government of Iran.
You've told me before that Iran is worse and more dangerous than ISIS. Do you still believe that?
Yes, because it's a theocratic, totalitarian, genocidal empire. And ISIS is much smaller and ambitious. Yes, it wants a caliphate. But I think the danger from Iran and its various totalitarian groups, whether it's Hezbollah or the Houthis or whatever, has very extraordinary ambitions. And I think it is up to all of us, Saudis, Americans, all of the people who attended that meeting in Tehran, I'm sorry, in Saudi Arabia, to stand against what the Iranians are doing and will, I think, continue to do.
Ambassador Woolsey, how is this, as you put it, theocratic, totalitarian, dangerous empire hurt the United States since President Obama signed
genocidal?
Well, add that to it. How has it hurt? How has it hurt the United States since President Obama has signed?
Death to America and death to Israel.
Sure. No, and that's been something that's been going on for 40 years. How has this genocidal, totalitarian, theocratic, evil empire hurt the United States since the former U.S. president decided to try to compromise with them?
I don't think that that compromise means anything other than the Iranians would like to speed up their nuclear program and would like to have us give in to them the way some American governments have in the past. President Obama, for example, had a interesting situation after Assad used chemical weapons on his own people. President Obama said, you do that again and you cross the red line, don't do it. Then Assad did it. And President Obama lateraled the whole problem off to the Russians. I don't think you can do worse than that as an American president. And that seems to be the way that the Obama administration was headed for its 8 years. Happily, we now have a different president, and I hope and think with a very different attitude toward dealing with totalitarian Iran.
Okay, so Iran supports Assad, right? But we can't use that as a metric for calling them evil, because the Russians also support Assad. You wouldn't call the Russians evil, would you, or a genocidal, dictatorial, totalitarian?
Depends on the Russian policy. I think it.
Right.
I think it is. I think it is quite evil to support totalitarian movements.
Undoubtedly.
Sometimes one has to do it. We had to do it in World War II in order to get the Soviets on our side to fight Hitler.
Okay, so
statecraft means sometimes you have to do things that you're not real happy with.
So why can't you maybe credit the Iranians for doing exactly the same? They feel they have to side with a bad guy, but he's their bad guy, just like the U.S. has had to side with some unpalatable characters in the past.
I think there's no chance. There's no chance that they are really working in some fashion to the government to try to move toward democracy, and it's just a tactical move. I don't believe that at all. I think the Iranian governmental structure is fundamentally evil. I think that's what President Trump was, one of the main things he was talking about, and I think he's right.
How do you change its government structure other than some sort of revolution or foreign interference and intervention?
I think we defeat, with the help of those 50 states, pretty much anything that the Iranian government tries to do to enhance its power and pursue terrorism. It's the leading terrorist state in the world. There's no real argument about that. And it supports terrorism all the time. We have to kill the terrorists. We have to defeat them. We have to help our friends, those 50 states, defeat them as well, and we all have to work hard at it together.
Is there anything democratic about Saudi Arabia?
Not in terms of governmental structure, but there is some element of reform, I think, moving with Prince bin Salman, and it may be interesting to see the level of development over the course of the next several years. I was on business for the U.S. Navy in Iran in 1978, about a year before the Shah was overthrown and the great mosque in Mecca was seized. And it was very much like, it wasn't a democracy, but it was very much like visiting Jordan. It was far from being the totalitarian country that it became in 1979. And I think the Iranian people deserve to have a decent government and a decent state. I think we ought to do what we can to help them. I think we ought to work with those 50 Muslim countries to try to help that happen. And we ought not to give in to a single thing that the Iranians push or want.
Ambassador Woolsey, I have the deepest respect for you, but I want to clarify something here. You're saying that, in your opinion, the Saudis are reforming, but the Iranians are not. Can you honestly tell me that that's happening? Saudi Arabia is reforming and Iran is not.
I think Saudi Arabia is just starting to reform, but you'll see some important reforms over the course of the next 2 or 3 years. And I don't believe a single thing that comes out of the mouths of the governors of Iran. I don't think they're reforming at all. I think this is all a total fraud.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador Woolsey, you were at the table with President Trump and the administration in the early days, but you're not anymore. Do you still trust his foreign policy vision?
I have a higher regard for it after that speech than I did before. I had some questions and issues before, but I had an open mind, and this speech helps me, I think, understand where he would like to go, how he would like to help lead resistance to Iran throughout the Middle East.
Ambassador James Woolsey, former head of the CIA. It's always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much.